Hello and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne. I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. This week I'm speaking with Kenneth LeRose, a nomadic full-time photographer and educator, as he embarks on a photographic journey sharing insights into his passion for capturing nature's beauty. Hosting numerous workshops across the US, Kenneth views photography as a free-flowing expression of creativity, emphasising growth through teaching. Kenny delves into his nomadic lifestyle, residing in an airstream for 6 years, and how his background in modelling and bodybuilding influenced his transition to landscape photography. He advocates for exploring non-iconic, less visited places and cherishing spontaneity in photography. We talk about his unique teaching philosophy and the impact of social media on photography and society. He accompanies his Instagram images with poetry, showcasing how one creative outlet can inspire another, adding another layer to his artistic expression. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Kenneth. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
Hey, what's going on there, Grant? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. It's a nice but sweaty day down here in Sydney. How are things where you are?
PNW, wet and cold.
Pretty
But yeah,
standard
good. Yeah, used to it.
Fair enough. So for those that don't know you, and I imagine there's a few of my listeners that may not have come across your work, why don't you start with who you are and why you do what you do?
Yeah, man, I think that's a great question. The why, right? The why is so important. My name's Kenneth LeRose, and I'm an astro landscape photographer. I teach photography for a living, and yeah, I've been living on the road for 6 years with my dog, and we live in a tiny little airstream. I'm actually coming to you live. Grant, I fumbled with some video here trying to get it to work, but the service is it's good enough for this audio, but just shy for the videos. Yeah, so been doing it for a while and teaching, and it's my passion. And man, I'm sure we're going to dive into some of that, but that's just like a snapshot.
Oh, absolutely. That's what this is all about, diving into the why in particular. So how did you get started? What was the genesis where you said, okay, photography is what I want to do and this is my passion? Where did that passion sort of ignite for you?
Yeah, it's wacky. I was in my younger years, I did a lot of modeling, so I was on the other side of the camera. And so I worked with a lot of different photographers, and sometimes so I was a bodybuilder for 15 years. I was
Mm-hmm.
competitive. I eat, slept, breathed fitness and bodybuilding. So I would get ready for bodybuilding shows, and then that's when I'd get like a lot of fitness shoots right around the time when I'm peaking, getting ready. So I would work with these photographers, and some I worked with were fantastic, like super talented. And then others, I'm just like, wait, they're shooting for this magazine, and I'm looking at the end result, and I'm just not super thrilled with the results. So there was like this little seed inside me that was like always whispering, if you learned how to do this, I bet you could do a better job. Sounds kind of pompous, but of course, there was like those phenomenal photographers, but so there was just that little seed. And so I ended up having I got this camera as a gift one year and it just sat on the shelf. And my buddy Rodney Logan, he lived in Vegas. He was a portrait photographer, a fitness photographer, and his mom was flying out. He wanted to teach her how to shoot. So he was like, "Hey man, can I use you as a model?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I was like, "Yeah, actually, can you teach me? I got this camera that I don't know how to use." And so, long story short, he told me shutter speed, aperture, ISO, taught me what they were. That
Uh-huh.
weekend, I drove up to Big Sur. I was living in Vegas at the time. I drove to Big Sur. I took 3,000 photos. That was like, I took photos of every single thing that I saw that I thought might be pretty. And just to learn like what the different settings were.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
from that point on, I hit the ground running. I came back to Vegas and my goal was to become this premier fitness photographer. So I got all my friends, a lot of people in the industry, Chippendales and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
the strippers. I lived in like this, I lived a wacky life back then. So I was surrounded by a lot of people in that industry. And yeah, man, just set up shoots and thought that was going to be my path was fitness photography. And one day I took a trip to San Francisco, shot on the beach, got this photo that I was like, whoa, it was the bridge, it was the water with some slow shot.
Uh-huh.
It was just one of those moments that you're just like, back then you don't really know what good conditions are, but like
Yeah.
hindsight, like
Yeah.
they were fantastic conditions and they made for incredible photos. I didn't have to do much. I didn't have to have much skill to snap these. And then I was hooked, man. I wanted to figure out how I did that and I wanted to recreate it. And I swapped my portraiture to landscape and just became obsessed with learning it.
Okay. Wow. So where did the landscape stuff, was that the point where you said, hey, this really works for me artistically and it's something that I want to keep doing? Or was that where you just started and saying, okay, I really want to get good at capturing the world around me?
Interesting. When I was shooting, my girlfriend at the time was like, "Hey, you should shoot nature." And I just looked at her and laughed at the thought of that. I was like, "What do you
Mhm.
mean?" I've driven down the road and seen like these epic mountains, and I take my phone out and I snap a photo, and they just look so far in the distance. Like
Yeah.
they just, I just, I didn't see the possibility in doing that. Let's backtrack to the question here. Sorry, I deviated from there,
Yeah,
but
you're right.
it was, yeah, there was I never really felt like I was creative. I felt like I like had these creative juices. I come from a really creative family. My grandfather was a
Well,
colorist. He worked for DC Comics. My
oh,
mother
cool.
could paint. My sister could paint. My dad, like, I just came from like all this talent. And then there was me who could lift heavy weights. I'm like, damn, like I want something that I want to feel something. So I wrote a little bit, but it didn't really I don't know. It didn't really speak to me. And photography, I don't know. It was the thing that I was missing my whole life. It was that creative outlet. It was the overflowing power of when you have these creative juices, they just build up and you just don't have an outlet for them. So I feel like a lot of us just try to find hobbies and sports and like whatever it
Sure,
is that
sure.
we try to do. Photography was that outlet for me that I never even thought existed.
Yeah, wow. So where did the life in the Airstream start and the nomadic life? Why did you get into that? And what is it that I guess keeps you going?
Man, it's such a there wasn't really much that went into this. I was having a conversation with this girl and she was like, I started on my photography journey. So I was taking little trips, living in Vegas, living in San Diego, bouncing back and forth.
Yep.
And I take little trips to like Yosemite, 4 or 5 hours, and then I'd cruise back. And it was just like a couple months of doing that. And she was like, "Hey, why don't you just live on the road?" And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "People don't do that. Like, I've never, what do you mean live on the road?" And she was like, "Get an RV and just travel." And I'm like, "Where would I sleep? I don't even, I can't even begin to think of what that would look like." And and then I thought about it and I Googled it. I was like, whoa, people actually do this. And then I
Mm.
saw online that an Airstream, like I had this little Jeep Rubicon. So I was
Yep.
like, man, can I tell? I can't really afford to get an RV. So I looked to see what the options were and I found out that I could tow something small and everything small just looked like super crappy. And then, of course, I saw this Airstream and I'm like, this is cool. So again, long story short, this conversation happened. 3 days later, I found myself buying an Airstream, and a week later, I still was living on the road. Really wasn't much like thought or into it. It was just like, well, this sounds like it would work. I guess people live on the road, so why can't
Sure.
I could figure that out, I guess. And I've never towed a trailer or anything like that, but if other people are doing it, there's
How hard can it be?
yeah, yeah, man. A week later, I I booked it from San Diego, renting a room out of my buddy's house, and I was like, all right, well, let me go drive to Texas. That'll make me feel like I live on the road and really far from anywhere I've ever lived. And so I did that, and the adventure began. And here we are 6+ years later. And what keeps me doing it? I don't know, man. Fear of not doing it. The FOMO of living in four walls
Yeah,
that have higher
staying
ceilings
rooted to
than a
one
couch.
place. Yeah. I was going to ask how you feel it's influenced your photography and which has influenced the traveling. Has that pushed your photography boundaries, or is your photography boundary pushing where you travel in your airstream?
Man, it's a good question. What drives what, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you that I've become pretty obsessed with things that I'm passionate about. I would say the photography drives the lifestyle.
Uh-huh.
And has it helped with cultivating or growing my skills as a photographer? I don't, I'm sure it does, but I think that I would be figuring it out anyway and putting the reps in. When I'm passionate about something, whether it's bodybuilding or photography or cooking or loving my dog, like whatever that passion is, it's it's ingrained and repeated day in and day out. And
Yeah,
there is
sure.
no option for it to not exist.
Uh-huh.
If I didn't live on the road, it would still exist and the passion would still be there. What living on the road allows me to do is pull up to places and not ever have to drive home. I don't ever have to do that 5 hour drive back home to San Diego and pass by all these amazing places that I would love to stop, shoot, explore. So it frees me to cherry pick places and seasons that I just want to hang out and shoot. Like I'm in the PNW right now, and I've been shooting these big waves for the last 2 months.
Yep.
And I've gotten to see the waves in the best light possible because I just hang out. I'm doing the business side of things. And every time I see conditions are looking good, like I just head out and do it.
Nice.
And yeah, like it gives you the flexibility to do that.
Yeah. I was going to ask, how does it influence the business side of things? So you do quite a lot of teaching, etc. Is it hard to forward schedule? Because, I know myself from doing workshops, you got to be out there months ahead to let people know where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing. How difficult is it for you to set up your schedule for things like the business end of things?
Yeah, I think with the business side of things, it's like anything. You have your challenges and you have your excuses that you make to not get things done.
Oh,
I'm such a big advocate of if you're if you have the means to get it done, like you're going to do it no matter where you are. I think living on the road definitely presents some of the challenges that you're talking about where you just don't really know where you are. And like you and probably many of the listeners right now are probably sitting in the confines of their home. So they know where they're going to sleep every night. They pay
yep.
their Wi-Fi bill and their electricity, and they know where their computer's set up so they can set up an office. And for me, I'm just everything's always getting tossed around and allocating time. Even Wi-Fi is a challenge, running water. There's just like a lot of challenges, but at the end of the day, I don't know if it's more difficult out here or am I just making excuses when I don't get
Sure,
things done and
sure.
try to blame it on nice circumstances. I don't know.
It leads me into one of the questions which I ask a lot of photographers. Where do you sit on that sort of planning versus spontaneity spectrum? There's people that do some planning depending on what it is that they're doing, particularly astrophotographers. You got to know where the Milky Way or whatever it is that you're going to shoot is going to be. At the other end of the spectrum, you got people that just opportunistically get out there and look for something that just happens, the right light, that sort of thing. Where do you fit on that spectrum?
I think this surprises people, but I fall very strongly on that second part of the spectrum. I don't plan anything except my
Okay.
workshops. I don't research places. In fact, Grant, if you invited me over and you said, "Hey, okay, come on out here. Let's go. Let's do a 3 day adventure. And then you told me the places that we were going, I wouldn't even look them up. And then if
Wow.
you tried to show me photos, I wouldn't want to see them because I don't want to be influenced by anything. I'm just going to go, Grant, I trust your judgment. I love your photos. I'm sure you're going to take me somewhere wonderful. And regardless, we're going to get, you know, good shots. Like I'm just
Sure.
going to figure it out. And if I miss the iconic shot, then I miss the iconic shot because it happens. What happens? Like sometimes I'll go places, I'll be like, oh man, if I would have just like went 30 feet over that
Yep.
hill, I would have had like a much better view. But I'm never upset about that. It just did. I'm happy because I captured something that I wanted to in my interpretation, and it wasn't influenced by anyone. So even with Milky Way stuff, I really don't like once in a while, if I'm like exploring, I'm like, oh, this is a cool rock and a cool tree. I wonder if it lines up with Milky Way. I'll open up Photo
Yep.
Pills and take a look. But I'm definitely, I don't like to go to iconic places and I don't like to go to places where I already have an idea of what the landscape looks like. My creativity in photography is fueled by finding those things on the spot. So I'm not much of a
Nice.
scouter either.
Yeah. Wow.
Again, unless I'm teaching. Different scenario. I've got to be
Yeah.
prepared
Yeah.
for students, and 1000% I'll do that for students. But if it's for me and my creativity, no, I don't want to even know what I'm going to shoot that day.
Sure. So in that planning phase of your workshops, etc., I guess you've got to work out where you want to be, where you want to shoot with your clients, and then set out a plan and a workshop format that is going to get the best out of that location. How much time and effort are you putting into that side of the business to say, okay, I'm going to go say, let's say it's Pacific Northwest, we're going to go to this specific spot and we're going to do sunset scapes or something. How do you put that format together?
Yeah, so it's really important. There's so much planning that goes into that. So ironically, it's the complete opposite of my approach. However, they get glimpses of my approach because with workshops, you have to leave it open to conditions.
Oh
So
yeah,
like
absolutely.
yeah, for instance, if you're coming on my Oregon Coast workshop, then I know that place like the back of my hand. And I've spent so much time that I get to go to these iconic places and show different perspectives of those places. So, based on conditions, what the light looks like that day, where the tide is, there's so many variables that all the places that I do workshops, I understand what different conditions are going to yield better results for photos in other places. So if
Right.
it's foggy that day, then I'm just like, okay, this is going to be the perfect place to go for the fog. So I really leave the itinerary open. It's so funny because I send an itinerary to students because they really want to know where they're going. And I think realistically, they just want to know that they're spending money and that they're not going to sit in a hotel room. So you put up an itinerary that's basically toilet paper because you're going to adapt and shift that so much. But I send it out anyway. And then the first day of the workshop, I'm like, all right, you guys got the itinerary now, throw it out the window. we're, we're gonna I did that so you guys knew that we had lots of stuff planned for you, but from now on we're going with the conditions. So if it looks like it's going to be clear tonight, we're shooting Milky Way. If it looks like there's some fog rolling in, we're going to shoot the redwoods. Like if depending
Right.
on where the tide is tomorrow or the next day, we're going to choose where we're going to go shoot because I've optimized the places that I know have looked the best at this tide and what we could shoot there.
Yeah.
But I think it's important as an instructor and a leader to know the terrain inside and out. So they're not, but I do one-on-ones where I'll be like, hey, I'm going to do a scouting mission. Do you want to come with me? And scouting mission just means we're just going to drive around and just shoot really cool stuff and figure out how to get some compositions. And I think that's where a lot of the learning comes from is doing things like that, like stepping outside of your comfort zone
Yeah.
and putting no pressure. So you're not going to this iconic place. And if you don't get like this I don't know, icon, like this incredible shot because and you're stuck with these beautiful, I guess stuck. I'm fumbling words here. I'm
Yeah,
trying
all
to
right.
find the right word to describe the feeling of satisfaction, and like my creator barometer just rises so high when I capture something that I just haven't seen before.
Yeah.
Versus if I roll up to, I don't know, Thor's well and take a photo of Thor's well that's been taken 16 million times with the water spouting out with some nice light. It's cool. It's beautiful. And like everyone should see it. But at the same time, I'm not feeding, I'm not
You're
feeding the
not getting the
creative side.
passion back out of that experience compared to finding your own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. So, in terms of that, obviously you're going to come across the failures that come with going out. Yeah, the conditions might look right, but you didn't quite nail the composition or whatever. How do you deal with those disappointments and the experimentation that comes along with, or the challenges that come along with that experimentation and finding something unique?
All right. Imagine if you could never fail in photography. How good would that feel?
Pretty boring, I think.
No, your failures will lead you to, yeah, I guess, like peaks and valleys. Like it's like th- there isn't any failing. There's just learning.
Yeah.
You just roll out, and I have learned how to not put so much pressure on myself because I know exactly what you're talking about. In the beginning, when I first, and especially before I lived on the road. And again, this is luxuries that you get from living on the road, from like
Sure.
cherry picking and like sitting around waiting. It's not like I have a corporate job where I'm traveling 4 days every few months and trying to jam pack as many places as I can. And that can be pretty stressful. And then if you don't have the conditions, then you can feel like a failure and you can feel like, oh my God, 4 days here, it's rained every day. I haven't gotten a single photo that I love. And but if you just shift that mentality and just instead of looking for the photos that you think you're going to get, look for the photos that are actually being presented because there are photos to take every condition everywhere. Maybe it's a video of like beautiful water droplets of the rain just like
Sure.
trickling off the leaves. There's always something. It may not be exactly what we have in mind, but throw that out the window. And that's what I mean by imagine if you could never fail. You
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
in, instead of having that failure mentality, you look at what you can get out of this and whether it's experience photos, there's it's just about being creative. And I remember on my birthday one year in Alabama Hills, I was shooting these light trails leading up into the Eastern Sierra Mountains. And I just kept on blue hour. You only get this small window to get those light trails and still get some definition on the mountains. And I'm sitting there and I'm shooting this and I just can't seem to get it. I'm about ready to give up. And the
Hmm.
guy that I was with was just like, no, man, there's a composition there. You just haven't found it yet. And whenever I'm in a place and I'm ready to give up and I'm just like, ugh, there's nothing here. We've said that to ourselves so many times. Like, oh, there's nothing here.
Yeah.
I promise there is. And I always go back to that mantra and that moment because you know what? I stayed there instead of packing up, which I was ready to. He said that. I'm just like, oh, he's probably right. What did I do? I stopped. I had this internal conversation and I found the composition and I got the shot. And it was
Right.
there. I just wasn't able to see it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Tell myself
where
that.
I was coming from in saying, it'd be pretty boring if you never failed. What I was thinking is, for me, the excitement that I get out of a success sort of counterbalances the disappointments that I might feel when, and it's not necessarily bad conditions or whatever. It's you go somewhere, it might be somewhere where you can only spend a short amount of time, as you were saying,
Yeah.
and you don't quite nail it. You get some nice shots, but you don't quite nail it. And that disappointment goes, I could have done that better. But that to me is part of that learning process of saying, okay, I didn't quite nail that, but I'm going to go back and do it again. Or if you're in a situation like yourself where you can sit and wait in the airstream for a little bit and then you can go out again and nail it, then that does change the way that you look at your photography. And I really like the way that you describe that as well.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. That's it. That's yeah, those failures. But again, like they're my perception on them are just like they're never failures. They're learning experiences, just like
Sure.
you said. If you don't take those photos in like epic light and fumble and not get the shot, of course, I come back to my computer all the time and I'm like, oh man, I was
What was I
awful.
thinking?
What was I thinking? I thought on the back of the camera that this was perfect, or why did I underexpose everything so hard? And these are the moments that you learn, and you're just like, it's never a failure. I'm not like, oh man, I failed. I'm just like, okay, I learned. I'm all right. I have a tendency to underexpose things. You know what? Sometimes I'm looking at through the camera, and maybe I'm looking at an angle through the viewfinder, so I'm not seeing the full composition, and I think I am. So I need to pay attention to when my eyeball touches the viewfinder and make sure I'm seeing the whole scene in there.
Sure.
There's like little bits and pieces that you're just like, how did I screw that up? But
Yeah.
yeah, we learn, and that way we can go out and fix them and just grow.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that people that do follow you will know you for is posting a poem with every image that you're putting onto, say, Instagram, for example. Where did that start, and how does that communication side of things play into your photography?
Dude, I can't believe you noticed that. I didn't think anybody read any captions.
Of course.
Yeah.
I won't say I read every caption of everybody's shots, but some are more interesting than others.
Yeah. No, it's funny. Like I love doing it, but I always like laugh, even if I don't like the poem. I'm just like, nobody's gonna read it anyway. So nobody reads captions. They're for me. Like in my world, they're for me, but also
Sure.
left open. Man, like I started writing them like it's so crazy. Like time flies, but I started writing them 7 years ago. I was hanging out with some friends, photography. I was getting my feet into photography 7 years ago. I feel like that was a huge like trial and error. Of course, like today is still a huge trial and error. But back then, like everything was new. I was an infant to photography.
Hmm.
And what people were doing then were taking quotes from like Martin Luther King or like
Yep.
Harriet
Yep.
Tubman and adding them onto. Do you remember that like phase when,
Yeah,
I mean, people
that
do.
really weird phase where everything had to be so profound and
Yes. Yeah. So like people's captions were just like really strong statements that were made
they were
by
like one
someone
of those
else.
calendars, those quote calendars that you get where every day there's a new quote from, as you say, Martin Luther King or JFK or somebody.
Yeah. And like super powerful words. But there was something, and I did it once or twice, and it just didn't feel authentic. And
Uh-huh.
I'm super weird. Like I just can't do things that just don't feel natural. So after I did, I'm like, you know what? Like, why am I using someone else's words? I can just, and no offense to anyone who does, but for me, I was like, I can take this opportunity to use my own words because I don't know, maybe I could write poetry. Like in the past, I've tried to get fancy and romantic with a girl. Like I'll write a little poem here and there once a year or something. And so I was like, man, maybe I could like, write poems. So I started writing. I don't know if you want to even call them poems. I just started writing things, and they weren't very good. They were just thoughts. And I remember I wish my girlfriend at the time would have told me that they sucked, but she didn't. She just told me everything was great. So I just assumed they were really good. And and just like anything else in life, through repetition, I started to go, you know what? I'm going to write a poem for every single photo. And I did. And I just forced myself to sit down and write. And it's just like going to the gym. Like sometimes you don't want to go, but when you leave, you're just like, oh my God, thank God I went. I just feel so much better. And it's the
Yep.
same thing with writing poetry for me. I rarely ever feel like sitting down and writing poems, but the after effect, I get these feelings and these emotions out and like creatively rhyme them. So it just it feels good. And they've just evolved into stuff that I think sucks a little less now. I don't think they're as bad as they were 7 years ago. But man, I really enjoyed that creative process. It's just another outlet. Again, I think for many of us, we just search for those things that we can allow to just pour out of us, those
Sure.
creative juices. And photography is one, and poetry is the other, man. It also helps me understand how I'm feeling. Like they're pretty deep and they have a lot of meaning. I think if you just read through them real quick, you're just like, oh, that's nice. But if you really think, they're actually they're actually really deep and
Mm.
connecting for me. And I know some other people do resonate with them, but it's always open to interpretation with poetry, as same as photography. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I think one of the things that comes out to me anyway is that ability to communicate both with the imagery, but also in the words that you're accompanying the image with. And that ability to communicate is really stressed in your work from what I can see. How much do you attribute some of your success to that ability to communicate?
Oh, well, also, thanks. That was nice. That was nice of you to say. Communication is everything.
Hmm.
I think it's really important. I was just talking about this last night about how important it is to communicate and set boundaries and and be authentic. Do what feels good to you, but
Mm.
also have the ability to communicate. And if you're a teacher, have the ability to listen. And that's part of the communication is listening and understanding what someone else needs or wants or expects. You, it's just a balancing game at that point is of listening and just understanding. So communication as man, this is like your whole podcast is communicating. Like you wouldn't have a successful podcast if you didn't have really great communication skills, because nobody would want to come on here. They'd be like, ah, Grant, man, you're not even hear the answer. Yeah, yeah. So I think communications, especially in any kind of frontline business where like you're part of the product. Sure, like my photography, but the ability to teach and then personality. Like I think most people that sign up for workshops, they're not signing up because they absolutely love my photography, and they're not signing up because they absolutely love me as a human. But it's like a combination. They're like, oh wow, like I like the way this guy communicates. Like I like his vibe. I think I could learn from him. His photos are pretty cool too. Like it's yeah, like the communication is a huge part of it, because in this day and age social media just opens the door for you to put your resume of communication out there for the world to see. It's
Absolutely. Yeah. Where do you see photography in society, and how do you think society is influencing photography and vice versa? Particularly with the advent of social media, there's so much photography out there now that certainly from a selling perspective, selling photography is so much harder because there's so much about. But where do you see photography fitting into society and in general?
I think we've always been like super visual, and phones and everything just getting like so much better. Everyone has access to taking to the ability to take amazing photos with what's in their hands. So I think the industry is booming, and people are way more interested in photography, which is why I think teaching and education is a great way to make a living. But also, damn, like social media has now been a huge influence in photography, because not everybody gets in it because of the creative. Like some of them get in it because they want their ego stroked,
Oh,
or
yeah,
they want
you're right.
following, or yeah, there's all different reasons why people, but I think social media has opened the door to like flood people into the gates, which is cool. Like photography, yeah, photography is beautiful. It's changed my life. It's allowed me to be creative, and I don't do it for everyone else. So for me, it's always going to be special, and it's always going to be it's going to exist. It's going to be a passion,
Hmm.
and man, like how it fits into society, I think just more and more like people are going to get interested and want to be onboarded into learning how to better their photography because they've gotten the taste. They've gotten a little taste with their iPhone or their camera phone, and they're just like, man, I want to do even cooler things. How can I learn to do that?
Yep.
And whatever the reason is, whether it's clout, they just want a big Instagram, or or they've been introduced to something that they genuinely enjoy and makes them feel better.
Cool. That's really interesting. I think a lot of people also one of the things you said, people being flooded with imagery. One of the things that it has done, you've only got to look at places like Iceland. 10 years ago, hardly anybody went there. Social media has just made it so popular, and sometimes to its detriment because you go to places and it's just packed out with 150 people there with tripods trying to get that shot of the waterfalls or whatever. But I think that it spurred travel, it spurred a whole bunch of different activities, hiking and so forth. The interest in that has
Yeah.
increased. So I'm seeing quite a lot of societal changes being driven by photography getting out there in social media.
Yeah, and if you're listening, can you please stop shooting all the iconic places? Because my Instagram is just flooded with the same damn photos from the same damn places all the time. Uh
No comp stomp.
yeah, man. I think that's like my only qualm is just that when I scroll through Instagram, it's literally the same stuff over and over. And there's only a handful of people that do some really inspiring stuff in my eyes that get me like excited too. So also like social media has diluted things, and just like you said, has brought foot traffic and unwanted foot traffic to a lot of
Oh,
places. But like
definitely.
you typically won't find me lined up with 150 tripods except shooting the waves because the waves are like so unique and different. But yeah, public service announcement. Please just do it a little differently. I want some new, pretty fresh stuff to look
Yeah,
at.
stand where the 150 tripods aren't.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm interested in is where uh, places that you love to keep coming back to. And I don't want your secret spots, but just general areas. What is it that keeps bringing you back to those places?
Man, it's just I love Mount Rainier. I love the PNW. I love just exploring out there and finding different moods. Fog has been really fun this last like year and a half shooting. I found a new fondness for fog, and I
Nice.
think that's been one of my favorite things to shoot. PNW, you always get a lot of that fog.
Yeah, you got plenty of opportunities for it up there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, man. The waves, it's like if we had this podcast a month from now or 2 months from now, it would be wherever I'm at. And it's
Sure.
just, there's no like real favorite. There's just, I don't know. What do I feel like doing this month? Where do I feel like going? And this last couple months have been these big waves, man. They've encapsulated my attention. And I can't get enough of them.
Mm, nice. What's your most memorable experience being out in the world?
There's two that come to mind. The first is the first time I ever saw light rays in the
Nice.
redwoods. It was the most enchanting, magical moment. I felt like I was in a movie. It didn't feel real, and it lasted for 7 or 8 hours. Man, what an experience to see these magical light rays just like drift through the forest for 7 hours.
Awesome.
God, I have been, I have now been back to get them 15 to 20 times since then because it just became this drug like that I just wanted more of. But I don't think I'll ever get that first feeling. I know that because I've been there with light rays like 15 more times and I'm still chasing that feeling and it
Yeah.
hasn't happened again. It happens. It's fantastic. There's that, and then there's the aurora in Death Valley, something that I
Wow.
just never in wildest dreams. Like it just what did you say? Did you say Death Valley and aurora in the same sentence? Yeah, I did. Man, I drove out there. There was forecasted aurora. Looks like it's gonna be the aurora storm of the century. And so I'm like, I was in Vegas. So I'm like looking at my buddy. I'm in his gym. I'm like, oh man, I don't feel like going to Death Valley. All right, I'll drive. Who knows? Like maybe there'll be aurora. And I'm driving out there and I've got I pull up my Airstream and pull on the side of the road. I'm in the basin, Badwater Basin, and I'm
Yep.
like, sunset, it's sun is just setting right now. So I didn't get there in time for sunset because I was procrastinating on even going out there. And so I pull up and I'm like, I don't even feel like putting my backpack on with all my gear. I'm just gonna hold my tripod and my camera and start walking and I'll just set up a time lapse and if I get some aurora, cool. And as I'm walking out there, I'm like three-fourths of the way where I want to be. And all of a sudden, man, I look in this, I'm watching the sky and it's just getting dark now. And
Yep.
I'm like, what is no way. That is no, I'm not, hold on. Let me put my tripod down and take a test shot here. So I'm like moving quick because I'm thinking I'm seeing aurora. And then I click the shutter and I do a test shot. And oh my God, there was this pink pillars up there. And
Oh,
it wasn't a pink glow, it was pink pillars in Death Valley. And all of a sudden, my heart started pounding. And I was like, where's my composition? Where's my composition? Where's my composition? So I'm running, right? I'm running. I'm like, I can't remember where the salt starts and where because I wanted the really salty foreground and I wasn't
yep.
quite
Yep.
there yet. It was just crunchy Martian land. And I'm like, oh my God. So I run it up like I found a little bit of salt. I'm like, this is fine. I set it down. And then I finally get the time lapse going. And I'm just like, oh no, I don't have my other camera. I run, it's basically a mile. I run a mile back to my Airstream and grab the rest of my gear, run all the way back out there and set up the second camera for a time lapse. And I watched the pillars in Death Valley. And I remember watching a random car, like there's a car that drives by every 30 minutes. And I would
Uh-huh.
yell, like, guys, look out the window. There's Aurora of a mile away. They can't hear me, but I was just like, I wish they could hear me, and I wish someone else could see this with me because it was incredible, man.
Mind
Yeah.
blowing. What about horror stories? Have you ever had any of those?
Oh God, they involve women.
Oh,
Um.
okay.
Oh man. Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to think, but a horror story doesn't. Man, I don't know. I feel like there's so many, especially living on the road.
I imagine
Um.
you would have the odd adventure or two where you get into a sketchy situation.
For sure. Actually, yeah. So there was one back in the day. We were going to like this place. I think we called it Three Hole Arch. I don't know if that's actually its name. It's like somewhere in Utah
Uh-huh.
or somewhere else. Also, just throwing this in there. If anyone ever asks me for locations, I never know where anything is because I don't ever research it and I just go and I usually hang out with people that know where it is and I never pin anything. If you open my Google Maps, there's no pins. I repeat, there are no pins. So when I'm like, I don't know where it is, I'm not like trying to be coy and not, but I like genuinely don't remember where it is. So anyway, so Three Hole Arch, we're rolling. I've got the Jeep and I send my friend out to go like spot me as I'm like kind of rock crawling. And needless to say, she didn't spot me. I just ended up becoming a seesaw on a little rock cliff. And all four
Okay.
tires were now off the ground. So it was very hot. I had my dog and I had two friends with me, and we had to build this bridge of rocks. So we spent the next 4 hours building up like rocks to reach the tires so that I could
Wow.
get traction, and then unloading my whole life out of the Jeep, everything that was heavy. And when I say whole life, like lots of stuff back there because I live on the road, and just to make it lighter so that we could get some traction and get out of there. And yeah, man, we finally did, but I thought we were gonna get thought we were gonna have to get towed, and we were out in the middle of nowhere, no service. This is like super, like 45 miles down a dirt road, like 45 miles, not exaggerating, like really far. So there was, but yeah, we made it. There was another time where I was with my ex girlfriend. We're just sitting in my Jeep. We're chasing bioluminescence. I think we're over by Coos Bay or something. It's one of the places where you can drive on the beach. And I'm sitting on the beach, and I didn't realize the tide was coming in, and it was like a super little sneaker wave that just those long ones that just like extend, and then they
Mm-hmm.
finally reach your tire. I guess it reached my tire twice, and I was like, "Oh, I think the tide's coming up. We should move." And so I turn the Jeep on, and I go, and I just spin, and I don't have any recovery plates or anything. And I'm like, oh crap. And then I spin some more, and now I'm sinking, and now the tide's coming in, and now the waves are cascading against my Jeep, and now there's 4 inches of water in my Jeep,
Yeah.
and I'm like, holy crap, what to do? So this drunk couple comes over in their pickup truck, of course, like drunk hillbilly Hugo over there, ties a chain on it, and then up, he gets stuck. So I'm like, crap. So I called a tow truck already, and they were like, finally got there. Waves like my Jeep is. I'm just like, is my Jeep gonna get washed away? I don't know. I'm pretty sure it will. And and so now the guy's like, all right, you got who's paying? And he's like, all right. I ended up having to pay for the guy who got stuck because
Oh,
the
no.
tow truck wouldn't tow me out until that was paid, and that guy wasn't gonna pay. I was just like, oh my god. So it ended up being like $800 to tow me out. And then yeah, and then 2 weeks later, I'm up on the top of a mountain at 14,000 feet in Colorado with my Jeep, and I'm with my buddy Marlon, and my crankcase just goes and it collapses. We went up for sunrise. We had to push the Jeep down from 14,000 feet to 10,000 feet to the very bottom, and then get another Jeep to pull us through a little river.
Oh,
And then we had to
no.
hitch a ride to a town that was an hour away so that we can get service, so that we can call a tow truck, so the tow truck can come out and then tow us 2 hours away. And then I traded my Jeep in that weekend after I fixed it because I was like, crap, that salt water is just going to destroy it. So RIP, I'm so sorry whoever bought that Jeep from a dealership. It probably they probably inherited the rest of the problems I was going to have.
They
But
put
yeah,
put
those are
their
some
put their foot
stories.
through the rusted floor pan.
Oh my God. So bad.
What do you think the biggest challenge facing photographers right now is?
Getting out of their own way. And I think a lot of it is, and I try to talk about this with what's the word I'm looking for? I'm drawing a blank. It's when people feel inferior and they compare themselves. What's the word that's thrown
Oh,
around all the
imposter
time?
syndrome. Yeah.
Imposter syndrome. Thank you. Yeah. So I think that's like the number one topic that I really try to dive into with people and try to get them out of that mindset of comparing themselves. So I think getting out of their own way, and just not comparing themselves to other people, because we're all on
Mm.
different journeys. We all have different visions. Like even when I'm teaching and I have students, I love teaching people who are new to photography because they see the world almost like an infant or a baby does.
Yeah.
They see it in a way that we don't because we've taught ourselves to look at it a certain way. So we tend to get tunnel vision, and we don't see sometimes all the beauty that's around us. And some of those new photographers still see that. So I try to teach people to embrace that side of them and never lose it, and also to learn from them on what they're seeing. So I think it's just not comparing ourselves to others, because there's just no reason to. You're never going to be anybody else. And your work is always going to be exactly where it should be. If you're a year into photography, you can't look and be like, wow, my work's going to look like Nick Page or Shane Bloom or Max Reeve or like these guys.
Sure,
If you're a
sure.
year into photography, then just be proud. Like I look back at my photos from a year in and 2 years in, and I'm proud of them, man. And I was proud of them, and I'm proud of them now. They didn't suck. They were just part of the journey. And the photos now, I'm just as proud of. And I think we need to give ourselves some slack and not compare and not think we need to be a certain place or try to rush it, because it's just a process. And this is a creative journey. And just remember why you do it and why you got into it. And that's the
Absolutely.
important part, not be influenced by other people.
Yeah, I'm totally behind everything you've just said there. As far as I'm concerned, the only person you should be comparing yourself to is your past self, so that you can say, okay, look at what I did, as you say, a year in or 6 months in, 2 years in, 3 years in. And if there's no progress, then maybe there's a problem. But 99.9% of people are going to see progress in their photography in that time, and they're going to go, okay, I'm actually on the right path, or I'm on a path that I'm comfortable with.
And if I could just interject here and just go back to what you just said, if you need to rewind and listen to what Grant just said, it's not cliche. This isn't him or me like trying to like put this facade on like how we think. You should 1000% take that mindset and run with it, because
Absolutely.
that's it's so important. And I just see so many people that fall victim to that. And I don't think it's talked about enough.
Yep.
And sometimes we just, yeah, we just put ourselves down in that way. And it's gross and it shouldn't exist. And yeah, listen to what Grant just said
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like, rinse and repeat that.
I I don't have a problem in looking at people whose work I just it makes my jaw drop, and I go, wow, how did they do that? Because that's inspiring to me, because that gives me a target to aim for, but I don't necessarily want to copy it. And that that to
Yeah.
me is really where your mindset, you're 1000% right there. Your mindset has to be, what am I doing? Am I improving? Am I going forward? And if you're looking at somebody else's photography and you think it's better than yours, it probably is. But so what?
Yeah. It's just, and it's perspective. Like you always look at the camera next to you and go, wow, they got a better composition than me. It never fails. Like that's,
Oh,
that's,
of
that's
course.
going to
Yeah,
always
grass
be
is
the
always
case.
greener.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a human nature that a lot of people have, including myself. I luckily I don't battle imposter syndrome to the point where I see it in people, but I'll definitely be next to someone shooting the same scene and be like, oh, wow, you have a better composition. They look at mine, no, you do. And I'm like, no, you do. We're like, let's switch. And then we switch and we're like, wait, no, that was the better one. Yeah, yeah, you're right. That's just how it is. And yeah, it's just important to oh, the other point, when you were talking, I wanted to make a point to say that embrace shooting with people that you think are better than you, and push boundaries. And
Totally.
please don't ever get jealous. Use that as motivation. I freaking love hanging out with someone, and whether it's a student or a friend that takes a better photo than me on that day,
Hmm.
my hat comes off. And that is my goal in life, is to surround myself with people that are constantly doing things better than me, because it's such a learning tool. You never want to be the best person in the room. And if and when you are, you need to figure out how to not be, because that's when you stop growing. And that's, dude, and I genuinely love this. I'm not like, these things I'm saying are not said just to, oh, I want to sound cool and sound like I am like the almighty and have this mindset.
Yeah,
I
and no, nobody's perfect, and if anybody is, then I don't want to know
I love when someone takes a better photo than me. It is not a failure. It
them.
is
Yeah,
not. It is, hell yeah, Victor, you snapped that photo. Damn, bro, I didn't see that. Hell yeah.
yeah,
Cool. Now it's a reality check. It's always a reality check, and it allows you to zoom out and see, wow, how could I have looked at this differently?
Mm. Yeah. And it always amazes me when you get a group of photographers together and they could be standing within 5 or 6 yards of one another and they'll come up with something different. You look at the back of the camera at the end of the shoot and you go, wow, where did you see that? You were standing right next to me and I didn't see that, you know?
Yeah, man. It's the best. I love
Yeah,
that.
it's a great feeling. What do you think the future of photography holds?
For me or the world?
Either or both. We got time.
Both. Yeah. Yeah. For the world, just pushing boundaries. Our technology is getting better. So we're going to have more efficient means to cater to people that are really high level creatives. So I think we're just going to we're going to explore new places and see new things and be inspired and keep growing. But for me, I don't know, man. I'm just going to keep trying to find those rocks that nobody else is kicking and uh, and snap them. I think as far as like the business side of things, I'm really focused this year on growing my business and
Sure.
allocating a lot of different ways to learn from me and from myself, for me
Yeah.
to keep learning too. But a lot of like online stuff, I think that's where I can make the most impact. Of course, like in person is going to have the most impact per person, but I think I could reach more people and help more people through like online courses and mentorships and
Hmm.
webinars and like just things that are widespread. I just want to touch more people and just help people along their creative process. It helps me too. So it's the win.
Who do you think I should be talking to on the podcast?
Oh man, just talk to your higher power, man. Just sit here and have a conversation with your higher power. I think you should have my dog on the podcast next.
Okay.
I think no, I don't know, man. Let me think. Come back to me on that one. I'm gonna really think of like someone under the radar that like doesn't get the recognition.
Cool. Yeah.
I think is like super interesting because I think those are the people
Oh,
that
absolutely. And it's one of the things I've always had in mind for the podcast is to not just be going for the super famous people. It's about everyone right across the spectrum. So I don't care if someone's got a following of 50 people on
right.
Instagram or 100,000 people on Instagram. I'll talk to them both if they're good
Yeah,
photographers.
I, I gotta plug my friend Jason Cudlow.
Okay.
He's such an interesting dude. He lives in an Airstream too with his wife and two Aussies, Australian Shepherds, and not yeah. Anyway, I won't make that joke, but yeah, and I think him and there's this dude Daniel Stein who's I don't really know much about him, but he takes cool astro photos
Okay.
and he's a super weird dude. I want to hear him on a podcast. I think he would be a
Okay.
super weird. Yeah, look him up. See what he does really cool astro, but he's just a weird dude. He might be interesting. And I don't know whose photography I really love. Paige Tingy. I don't know if you know who she is, but
Yeah, I've seen her work. Yeah.
dude, I'm like always blown away by her colors. And
Mm.
I think she's my favorite like female artist. Not to put classes because I think we're all just artists,
Yeah.
but just just trying to recognize some of the female artists. But yeah, Paige's. I've never actually met her, but I always hear great things, and I bet she'd be really fun to have on the podcast.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I've got one more question for you, and for most of my listeners, it's the one that we want to get to the bottom of in the photography community. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Oh man, come on. Who likes pineapple on their pizza?
I don't mind it.
Yeah, yes. I don't I think I'm with you on there. I don't mind it, but I would never order pineapple on the pizza.
Yeah,
If I'm
I wouldn't
hungry,
order it, but I'd eat it if it was there.
yeah.
Fair enough. It's been absolutely marvelous getting to know you a little bit better, Kenny.
Too.
Where can people find your work?
Where can they find that? I guess every social media platform that you can think of. Just look up KRL photo because somehow I'm everywhere, but nowhere at the same time. But yeah, YouTube. Yeah, if you guys are listening, I'm really trying to grow my YouTube. I'm trying to go from 5 to 10 subscribers. So if you can be my 10th subscriber, I would be delighted to have you over there. So yeah,
Excellent.
it's KRL photo.
I'll
What's that?
definitely hit you up on that. And the same, if anyone's listening, go to my YouTube and hit me up because I don't think 300 subscribers is going to be sustainable for too long.
I'll get you. I don't think I follow your YouTube. So I'm always looking for new YouTubes to follow, honestly, because I don't follow enough.
Yeah,
But
I'm the same. Oh, well,
yeah,
thank you
yeah.
very much, Kenny. It was great talking to you.
Dude, you too, Grant, man. This was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. I hope to see you out shooting soon.